Shawn Marion. His shot looked like it broke every rule, but he never cared. He stood kind of narrow, with his right foot sneaking a little forward and his shoulders twisted like he was mid-turn instead of setting up clean. His knees bent just enough to keep him quick, not like those shooters who look like they're charging up a spring. Then there's the ball placement, which was way too low, like he was hiding it from the defense before launching it. He scooped it up fast, with his elbow bending sharp and tight. The release? Wild. He'd flick it from around his chin, almost shoving it at the rim. The ball flew low, flatter than normal, but it got out of his hands before defenders could react. His rhythm felt rushed and awkward, but it worked because he trusted it. Results beat style, and Marion proved that daily. Chuck Hayes. It felt like watching someone try to lift a fridge while shooting a basketball at the same time. His stance stayed wide, like he was bracing for impact, with his right foot barely ahead, but his shoulders kind of drifting left. His knees bent deep, looking more like a wrestler than a shooter, and his upper body leaned forward like he expected someone to crash into him. Hayes gripped the ball tight, both hands clenching it like he was afraid it'd escape. His right hand sat under the ball, but too flat, and his left hand crowded the top, basically smothering the poor thing. His shot motion crawled from chest to face, with his elbow flaring out awkwardly. When he finally let it fly, it pushed off low from around his mouth, flat as a pancake, and with barely any spin. Defenders never panicked, since his slow, jerky motion gave them all the time in the world. Joakim Noah. His shot felt like it came from another planet, but it stuck around way longer than anyone expected. He stood with his feet shoulder width apart, right foot sneaking forward, knees bent just enough to look uncomfortable. The ball started low, hugged tight to his chest, like he was scared it might roll away. His elbows flared out like airplane wings, and his left hand refused to let go, hanging on far too long. When he finally started the motion, it looked like he was trying to sling the ball sideways instead of at the rim. His wrist twisted awkwardly, sending the ball spinning with that wild side spin every time. He barely jumped, legs staying stiff, while his shoulders twisted off balance. The follow-through? Practically non-existent. His hand froze halfway up, fingers stretched like he was waving goodbye. The flat, wobbly arc of the shot rarely gave him forgiveness, but Noah stuck with it, fearless as ever, no matter how rough it looked. By the way, if you guys want to subscribe, I'm going to start posting every day. Thanks. Anyways, Michael KiddGilchrist. His shot looked like he was wrestling the ball instead of shooting it. He set up with his feet a little narrower than shoulder width, right foot forward, but his body twisted slightly left, throwing off his aim before the ball even left his hand. His knees bent, but the stance felt more like he was bracing for a charge than about to launch a jumper. He held the ball low, around his chest, gripping it like it might run away. His left hand clamped on way too long, basically steering the ball like a wheel. The motion was slow, like he had to convince himself to shoot every time. His elbow flared out, creating an awkward angle, and when he released, it left from his mouth level, flat, and rushed. The shot spun weird, sometimes wobbling in the air. Defenders barely respected it, and honestly, neither did he. Despite it all, he kept grinding, never letting a broken jumper stop him from impacting the game. Ben Simmons. His shot looks like it's trapped in slow motion, stuck between two minds every time he releases. He sets up tall, barely bending his knees, standing like he's posing for a photo instead of getting ready to shoot. The ball sits low at his chest, gripped tight by both hands. When he starts the motion, his elbow flares out badly, twisting the ball sideways before he even lets it go. His wrist snaps stiff, with barely any backspin, and the shot flies flat, like it's racing to hit the front of the rim. He hardly uses his legs, barely jumping, relying too much on his arms to force it up. The result? Wild misses, air balls, and rim bricks that defenders ignore completely. His hesitation is brutal to watch, but even with all the form's disasters, Simmons keeps attacking games with everything else he's got when he plays. Kevin Martin. His shot looked like someone fast-forwarded a catapult, but man did it work. He stood pretty narrow, upright, almost casual, with his right foot sneaking forward and his shoulders turning left, just enough to look crooked. His knees barely bent, like he'd rather let his arms do all the work. It was just a shove to the motion. When he pulled up, his elbow flared out, giving the shot a wild side angle. His release sat around eye level, higher than some unorthodox shooter, but still not textbook. His wrist flicked sharp, sending the ball with decent backspin, though sometimes it wobbled from the guide hand's interference. The shot flew quick, with a nice arc that kept defenders guessing. Martin's form broke all the rules, but with a fast trigger and relentless confidence, he turned that awkward slingshot into a serious scoring weapon. Shaq. His shot looked like he was trying to throw a medicine ball into a thimble. He stood wide, barely bending his knees, with that 7-foot frame towering over the line, but giving him no advantage. He held the ball way too low, practically near his waist, and his giant hands wrapped it like he was palming a toy, his left hand twisting the ball awkwardly just as he let it go. When he shot, it was more of a heave than a flick, with his elbow flaring out and his wrist snapping stiff, sending the ball on a flat, clumsy path. There was barely any spin, and misses flew everywhere. Hard bricks, air balls, rim grazers. Under pressure, his motion slowed, his shoulders tensed, and the whole thing fell apart even more. Still, despite the wild misses and defenders grinning at the free line, Shaq kept firing away. His form might have been a disaster, but he bulldozed through it the same way he bulldozed everything else. Lonzo Ball. His shot his rookie year looked like he was launching a frisbee across his body, hoping it'd find the rim. He started with the ball low by his right hip, then dragged it across to his left side, like he was passing something to himself mid-air. His right elbow flared, and instead of going straight up, the ball shot across at an awkward angle, releasing near his left temple. His left hand didn't help matters, pushing the ball and messing with the spin. His feet were never fully lined up, with his right foot sneaking forward and knees bending inward, making his whole lower body feel out of sync. The jump was off balance, and the rhythm felt stuck in 2 gears, pausing right at the top before he awkwardly let it fly. Defenders barely respected the shot, sagging off and daring him to pull. Even with small tweaks, like trying to speed up his release, the form stayed rough all year. His rookie numbers were brutal, and it felt like his shot fought against him every single game. Barnett. His shot looked like punctuation in motion, and defenders never figured it out. He exploded upward, both legs kicking back wildly, especially that right leg, which snapped behind him like he was mid-karate move. His body tilted forward just enough to balance the madness below, making the whole thing look like a flying question mark. He shot left-handed, straight from the peak of his jump, locking his elbow tight and snapping his wrist to fire the ball with a clean backspin. His follow-through hit that perfect gooseneck, fingers pointing down like he was pressing a button in midair. The rhythm of his shot was just as funky as the form itself. He worked in a quick hop step, stayed balanced despite the kick, and used it to freeze defenders in their track. He even taunted them mid-shot with that famous line, "Fall back, baby." The awkward timing and surprise release point made it a nightmare to contest. Barnett's form might have broken every textbook rule, but it worked so well. He dropped over 15,000 points and became a key piece of championship history. Manute Bol. His shot looked like he was catapulting the ball from a rooftop, and honestly, it kinda worked for him. He launched from the right side of his body, not dead center, sending the ball on a funky sideways path. His follow-through pointed more to the side than at the rim, which felt about right considering the rest of the motion. He barely used his legs, keeping them staggered with a small bend, relying almost entirely on those incredibly long arms. His release point? Absolutely ridiculous. Around 10 feet high, so nobody even bothered contesting. He didn't snap his wrist much either, mostly just extended his arm like he was placing the ball on a high shelf. That left the shot with a flat arc and awkward side spin. But somehow, he squeezed out just enough success to keep defenses honest. Opponents gave him space, assuming he'd pass or brick, and Manute took advantage. Under Don Nelson, he let threes fly, and even though the numbers weren't pretty, his confidence grew. His form rewrote what people expected from Giants, laying the early groundwork for today's stretch bigs. Rick Barry. People love to clown the underhand free throw, but Barry turned it into a straight-up weapon. He grabbed the ball like he was cradling something fragile, fingers spread out, thumbs aiming at each other under the ball. His whole setup looked calm, but it packed serious precision. Arms swung up smooth from his sides, almost like a pendulum, and he let the ball roll off his fingertips with zero drama. No flicky wrists, no jumping, just pure control from his shoulders and back. The release? Right around chest height, with his palms facing the sky like he was serving it up on a platter. His stance kept everything grounded, feet set shoulder width apart, knees with just a little bend, weight rolling from heels to toes. The ball left his hands with this perfect high arc, a soft spin keeping it steady, and it dropped into the rim like it had no other option. Barry loved that it cut down on errors. Less moving parts, less nonsense. Even though people laughed, he stuck with it and made it lethal. Barry's routine never changed, and that's exactly why his free throws felt automatic, no matter what. Shea, his jumper is wild because it breaks so many rules, but somehow ends up being pure money. He starts with this slightly staggered stance, right foot a bit forward, knees bent just enough, and weight bounced through the middle of his feet. When he dips into the shot, it's smooth. No awkward lean, just clean motion straight down to build power. He does not jump super high, but he gets just enough lift to stay controlled and balanced. What really jumps out is how he almost always lands in the same exact spot, which keeps everything repeatable. His upper body is all about precision. He brings the ball up on his right side, keeps that elbow tight at a perfect angle, and snaps his wrist at the release point right around his forehead. His hand placement is smart too. with his shooting hand behind the ball and the guide hand just helping it stay steady. The arc is medium but reliable, and he's tightened up that release time a ton since college. The best part, defenders hate it. His high release and unpredictable pace make contesting a nightmare. He worked hard to cut wasted movement, and it's paying off everywhere. Tyrese Haliburton, his shot looks like it should not work, but somehow it keeps dropping. He barely leaves the ground, using this set shot style that looks more like a casual warm-up than an NBA move. What really throws people off is how he releases from his left side, even though he shoots right-handed. His elbow flares out at this wide angle, and instead of a classic wrist snap, it feels like he is pushing the ball forward, feet staggered, knees barely bent, and most of his weight leans back when he fires it off. He keeps the release fast, around half a second, and even though it comes from chin level, it still works. The arc is decent, the spin is steady, and he has made it clear that speed matters more than flash. Back in college, he had the same strange form, but now it is even quicker. He added a little hop to get in rhythm, and his numbers have kept climbing. Defenders are always guessing. His odd timing and side release make it hard to contest, and he does not lose confidence after misses. He kept the form everyone doubted, and it turned into pure production. Bill Cartwright. His shot really looked like something out of a backyard experiment, but the results were hard to argue with. He would crouch down so deep, it seemed like he was about to tie his shoes, holding the ball low between his legs before launching it with a two-handed push. The release came from behind his head with barely any follow-through, and the ball flew out on this flat, almost line drive arc. For a guy his size, that 77% free throw mark was no joke. When he stepped out for jump shots, the setup stayed just as quirky. He kept the ball slightly behind his head, elbow flaring out wide, and the follow-through looked like a shot put. There was hardly any spin, almost like he wanted the ball to just knuckle its way in. His feet spread way past shoulder width, with his weight pushed back and barely any lift off the floor. Despite all the jokes about how strange it looked, it kept working. Coaches never bothered to fix it because the ball kept finding the net. Cartwright showed that as long as the shot goes in, no one cares how you make it happen. Markelle Fultz. His jumper's been through more phases than a reality show contestant, but somehow he kept pushing forward. Back at Washington, his shot was smooth as ever, with a high release, quick trigger, and perfect balance. The backspin was tight, the base was strong, and he could pull up off the dribble like it was second nature. He knocked down over 41% from deep in college, and his mid-range was just as dangerous. Then came Philadelphia, and everything changed. His motion got stuck with a hitch at the top, the release point dropped closer to his chest, and his follow-through turned into more of a push. That shoulder issue wrecked his mechanics, and he even had trouble lifting his arms fully. The nerve problems killed his control, and all kinds of bad habits crept in. Confidence, pretty much gone. But in Orlando, things started climbing back. He lowered the release a bit more, flared the elbow out, and built a two-motion shot with a small pause. His free throws climbed big time, and his mid-range touch came back strong. Fultz rebuilt everything from the ground up, and it's proof that determination still matters when talent alone is not enough. Ronnie Brewer. His jumper was the kind of shot that made you pause for a second, wondering how it even left his hands. Because of a water slide accident, as a kid, his right elbow stayed permanently bent, forcing him into this awkward side-loaded release. Instead of the usual hand under the ball, his shooting hand sat right on the side, and the ball came out flat from his chest. His follow-through barely existed, which left the ball spinning less than once on its way to the rim. His stance was wide, feet set apart, but the weight leaned back like he was bracing for a gust of wind. He barely jumped at all, maybe 4 to 6 inches, turning the whole thing into more of a push shot than an actual jump. When he shot free throws, it got even funkier, like a two-handed shove. Still, he managed around 67% in the league, which honestly feels like a miracle. Defenders never respected the shot and sagged off constantly, daring him to fire away. But Brewer survived by leaning into his defense and slashing. He found ways to stick around, even if his jumper never fully cooperated. Larry Bird. His shot looked like it belonged in a textbook, but with just enough weirdness to make it all his own. He fired it off from above his right ear, getting that high release around 8 feet 5 inches up, which made blocking him basically pointless. His wrist action came from endless wrist exercises growing up, snapping clean to give the ball a perfect spin. Bird's follow-through stayed locked in, fingers pointing down like he was hanging onto an invisible shelf. The base of his shot was simple but sharp. He stood with his feet shoulder-width apart, right foot just ahead for balance, knees bent just right to shift weight smoothly from his heels to his toes. He never jumped much, only about 10 to 12 inches, but with his quick lift and release, defenders couldn't close in time. His arc sat comfortably around 48 to 52 degrees. Not super high, but dead on precise. Even injuries couldn't throw him off. After jamming up his finger and dealing with back problems later in his career, Bird kept making adjustments, but never lost that smooth touch. His obsessive practice and confidence turned his shot into pure consistency. Marcus Camby. His jumper looked like it came from a guy trying to invent basketball mid-game, but somehow it found a way to work just enough. At the free throw line, Camby had this odd habit of circling the ball around his waist before shooting, like he was warming up for a magic trick. Instead of lifting the ball up smoothly, he shoved it forward like a chess pass. With barely any arc, his wrist flick was all over the place, sometimes spinning sideways, sometimes not spinning at all. His feet were not exactly steady either, shifting mid-shot and throwing off his balance. Despite the chaos, he still managed over 63% from the line, which honestly feels like a small miracle. From mid-range, things stayed weird. He loaded the ball way behind his head, his elbow stuck out wide, and he barely jumped, using mostly his arms to power it. Defenders gave him space, assuming he would miss, but that space let him find just enough rhythm. Camby never forced it though. He stuck to defense, rebounding, and smart shots. His form was never pretty, but it got the job done just enough to keep defenders guessing. Payne. His jumper looks like he's slingshotting the ball across a parking lot, but it keeps going in, so defenders just have to deal with it. As a lefty, he brings the ball awkwardly across his body to the right side, firing it from near his forehead in this diagonal motion that feels like it is fighting gravity. His elbow flares out, adding side spin instead of the usual clean backspin, and his follow-through is short and snappy, with his fingers weirdly pointing left when he finishes. His lower body does not follow the normal lefty script either. He sets up with a wide stance, right foot slightly ahead, and bends his knees deep to load power. He barely leaves the floor, more like a set shot with a tiny hop, but the ball still gets out fast. The arc is flatter than most, but the quick release keeps defenders too slow to react. Early in his career, defenders sagged off him like he was invisible. Now, he is torching them, shooting a high clip from deep with the Knicks. Payne's shot might be funky, but he owned it, mastered it, and made it work perfectly. Shawn Prince. His jumper always looked like it was going sideways, but it kept finding the bottom of the net. Even though he shot right-handed, he let the ball go from his left side, near his left temple, giving the whole thing this diagonal, across the body motion. His elbow stuck out at a wide angle, which sent the ball off with more side spin than clean backspin. He barely snapped his wrist, ending the shot with more of a pushing motion, fingers pointing awkwardly to the left. His base was solid though, with a wide stance and his right foot a bit ahead, which is not typical for a right-handed shooter. He bent his knees deep to power up, but barely left the floor when he let it fly. His arc was lower than average, but with that long frame and wingspan, it did not matter. He got the shot off quickly, before defenders could react. What saved him was consistency. He kept the same form every time, which made him reliable in tight games. His length gave defenders trouble, and he stayed confident no matter how strange the form looked. Prince owned his style, and it worked. Andris Biedrин. His shot looked like he was desperately trying to hand the ball to the rim, but without much success. At the free throw line, his routine turned into a nervous ritual, full of false starts and awkward resets. Instead of lifting the ball cleanly, he pushed it from chest level, barely using his wrist at all. The result? A flat, shaky arc that never had much of a chance. His legs stayed stiff, barely bending at the knees, so there was almost no energy in the motion. The numbers were brutal. Across his career, he hovered around 50% from the line, but at his worst, he dropped to 11%. Opponents figured it out fast, baiting him into fouls because they knew he dreaded the line. When he stepped outside the paint, it got even messier. His set point floated behind his head, the guide hand often messed with the release, and he never even attempted a three. What really crushed him though was the mental side. Injuries and harsh coaching chipped away at whatever confidence he had left. Biedrins never adapted, and his shot stayed stuck in the same broken loop. Reggie Miller. His jumper always had that wild little detail where his shooting wrist smacked into his guide hand, making this unmistakable clicking sound on release. It happened because his elbow flared out more than usual, and he kept his left hand stiff instead of letting it drift away. When he snapped that right wrist forward with all that torquing, the two hands collided like clockwork. The result? A shot that looked strange, but dropped like rain. He brought the ball up to around his forehead, but kept it slightly off to the right side. That elbow sticking out about 15 degrees only added to the odd motion, yet his fingers still finished aimed dead at the rim for perfect backspin. His stance stayed square, feet locked in and pointed straight ahead, giving him a stable base to fire from. He never bothered with the dip either. He caught and let it fly in one smooth motion, making it tough to contest. That quirky wrist click became a built-in rhythm keeper. It made his release quick, his spin tight, and his form repeatable. Miller never cared about textbook looks, he cared about buckets, and he delivered constantly. probably the greatest shooter ever with an unorthodox shot. Suganu, his shot looked less like a jumper and more like a desperate pass to nobody, especially at the free throw line. Before every attempt, he shuffled nervously, resetting his feet over and over like he was stalling for time. Then, instead of lifting the ball up, he pushed it straight out from his chest, almost like a two-handed soccer throw. His wrist barely moved, which left the ball floating without spin, knuckling toward the rim with no real touch. His knees stayed stiff too, so the whole thing relied purely on his arm. The result was rough. He lived at 42% from the line and even had seasons sinking under 30%. Teams gladly hacked him, knowing he would give them free misses. In live play, it was no better. Diop stuck to dunks, and the occasional slow, flat mid-range shot with his elbow flaring wide. Forget three-pointers, he never took a single one in 12 seasons. He started playing late, and it showed. His stiff body mechanics and shaky confidence made improvement nearly impossible. Diop's defense kept him around, but his shot always held him back, stuck in the same broken cycle. Wilt Chamberlain, his regular shot felt like he was trying to muscle the ball into the basket with pure arm strength and zero finesse. He fired free throws from around chest level, pushing the ball out stiffly instead of lifting it smoothly. The arc was too flat, hovering around 35 degrees, which left him barely any margin for error. His wrist barely snapped, which meant the ball came off his hand with wobbly, inconsistent spin. Even worse, his guide hand sometimes got in the way, sending the ball sideways like a wild pass. His lower body did him no favors either. He kept his knees stiff and skipped the natural flow from legs to arms, relying completely on his upper body. Unsurprisingly, his free throw numbers stayed brutal, stuck around 51% and sometimes even dipping under 40%. Teams fouled him on purpose, knowing he would clank away free points. For a short stretch though, he switched to the underhand shot. Suddenly, everything clicked. Using his legs and core, he flicked the ball upward in a smooth pendulum motion. The arc got higher, the touch got softer, and his accuracy skyrocketed, but pride pulled him back, and he left the better shot behind. Matt Bonner. His jumper looked like he was launching a shot put across the gym, but it landed right where it needed to. He shot from the right side of his body, giving the motion this awkward diagonal path. His elbow flared out at about 30 degrees, which threw a bit of side spin on the ball. Instead of a clean wrist snap, he finished with more of a push, and his fingers pointed off to the left rather than toward the rim. His base kept him steady though. He set his feet shoulder width apart and bent his knees deep to power the shot, relying on his legs way more than his arms. He barely left the floor, just 6 to 8 inches of lift, making it feel like a hybrid between a set shot and a jumper. Even with that flat arc around 40 degrees, he got the ball out fast enough to beat defenders closing out. Bonner's real trick was consistency. He repeated the same form every single time, and at 6'10", his high release made it tough to block. Defenders often gave him space, and he took full advantage, knocking down shots at an elite clip. Derek Fischer. His shot was not the flashiest, but it always felt built for the moment. He fired from a high release point, right around his forehead, which helped him get the ball off, clean over bigger defenders. His elbow flared just a little, about 15 degrees, which gave his follow-through a straighter finish instead of that textbook tuck. His wrist snap was sharp without being dramatic, giving the ball steady backspin every time. The guide hand stayed out of the way, never messing with the release. His base was pure balance. Feet set shoulder width apart, squared up perfectly to the rim. He bent his knees just enough to get power, then popped up with barely any lift, maybe 6 to 8 inches, leaning more on quickness than explosion. His shot came out fast, around half a second, with a tight, straight trajectory and hardly any drift, even with the defender chasing him. What made it work? He kept it simple. Same form, same speed, every single time. Under pressure, when defenders expected hesitation, he just let it fly. Fischer's form lived in that perfect space between clean mechanics and pure confidence, and in clutch time, it never let him down. Jamal Wilks. His shot looked like he was tossing laundry over his shoulder, but somehow it worked like a charm. He loaded the ball behind his right ear, with his elbow flared way out, giving the motion this strange, sidewinding path. Because of that angle, the ball came off with this odd sideways spin, but it still dropped at nearly 50% from the field over his career. His release ended quickly, with barely any follow-through, and his guide hand stayed stiff instead of falling away, which flattened out the arc around 40 degrees. His footwork stayed solid though. He kept his feet square to the basket, giving him a reliable base. He did not jump much at all, maybe 6 to 8 inches, leaning on his long arms and pure touch rather than spring. Defenders had a hard time reading the shot because of the strange windup, and by the time they reacted, the ball was already gone. Wilks never cared about textbook looks. His smooth, quick release kept defenders guessing and helped him pile up points in any situation. Al Horford. His shot has come a long way from the days when he barely stepped outside the paint. Early in his career, he fired from chest level with a clunky two-motion release, pausing after the gather before letting it go. He stuck to short jumpers and back to the basket moves, rarely even thinking about the three-point line. Through his first 8 seasons, he hit just 1 3, and nobody cared because he was locked in the post. But then, he flipped the script. Horford raised his release point to forehead level and smoothed out that load phase to get rid of the clunky dip. He tucked his elbow tighter, cleaning up the side spin and making his shot quicker and cleaner, although he still holds the top of the ball kinda. But suddenly, he was draining threes at over 34%, hunting open looks from the corners like a seasoned shooter. Later in his career, Horford's shot got even faster, dropping to around half a second from catch to release. He killed defenders on pick and pops and trailing in transition. His base stayed wide and stable, guide hand cleanly falling away, and his backspin stayed tight. Horford mastered evolution, turning himself into the model stretch big, Sam Perkins. His shot looked like a catapult winding up from the side, but it worked way better than it had any right to. Even though he shot right-handed, he brought the ball up from his right side at a diagonal angle, with his elbow flaring out wide at about 30 degrees. That angle threw side spin on the ball instead of pure backspin, and instead of snapping his wrist cleanly, he finished with a gentle push, his fingers oddly pointing left. His lower body kept him steady. He planted his feet shoulder width apart and bent his knees deep, using his legs to power the shot. He barely jumped, maybe a few inches, depending more on arm strength and a soft touch to get the ball there. Even with a flat arc around 40 degrees, his high release point and quick trigger, around 0.6 of a second, made it tough to contest. Early in his career, he hardly shot from deep, but once he leaned into it, he became a legit weapon. Perkins forced big men to guard the perimeter, a wild concept back then. He carved out space with that funky form and proved you do not need perfect mechanics to make defenses panic. Michael Adams. His shot looked like he was launching a fast pitch at the rim, but defenders couldn't stop it. He let the ball fly from chest level, off to his right side, using a motion that felt closer to a catapult than a clean jumper. His elbow stuck out around 45 degrees, adding this wild side spin to the ball. His wrist barely snapped at all, making the whole shot look like a two-handed push more than a flick. His stance was just as strange, setting up with a wide base and his left foot forward, which is not typical for a right-handed shooter. He skipped the dip, using torque from his upper body instead of power from his legs. His jump was tiny, just 4 to 6 inches, which made it feel like a hop instead of a true leap, but the quick release at about 0.4 of a second kept defenders helpless. Adams turned his size into an advantage. At 5'11", his funky form let him shoot over taller players with ease. He leaned into that unorthodox rhythm, and it paid off, making him one of the deadliest long-range threats of his time. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.